VikesNow, we are finally back. Our first show of the week. I was traveling back from a disappointing loss at the Cincinnati Bengals. A wonderful experience. The fan experience is there. I've gone to a handful of Vikings road games in my life, and I still have never experienced like, oh, these fans are awful. You should never go to the blah 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 stadium. Everybody was great. The loss sucked, but on the whole, it was a memorable trip. I'm here with Josh Frey, who we're going to talk about the upcoming events, some draft stuff. How you been this week? Have you fully recovered?
I think I've fully recovered. I mean, look, at the end of the day, this NFC just won't let the Vikings die. 7-7. We're lost three of the last four, and they're still in that number 6 seed, baby. So we're hanging on by a thread, but bounce back win hopefully this weekend, and we'll be ready to go. So
I was telling Yannick Eckhart, who writes for Vikings Territory, who went on the Cincinnati trip with me when they were up 17-3. I was telling him, God, if they hold on to this, all they need to do is not lose the remaining three games, and they'll be in the postseason. Now, after losing 27-4, you have to win two of the remaining three games just to get in the postseason. So that's how devastating the L was at Paycor Stadium. And one of the, I guess, somehow overlooked factors of that loss was the defensive collapse at the end of the game. Following that 17-3 lead, the Vikings decided we're going to allow 3 70-plus yard drives for touchdowns, and that'll be that. And that's what created the loss, in my opinion. But I want to know from you, is because we have some track record, Brian Flores coaching the Miami Dolphins for 3 seasons and now here in Minnesota, is this Flores collapse thing like late in games here to stay? Because we saw it against the Broncos, a little bit against the Bears, certainly against the Bengals. Is this just what happens?
yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think like hopefully Saturday doesn't happen again. Like that's pretty much like the worst that I've seen this defense play all season. Was in during that fourth quarter. And then the overtime, you could go a bunch of different ways with what happened there between those QB sneaks, and then the ultimate game-winning drive where Jake Browning came alive again. But I mean, I do think that there is some merit to be a little bit concerned with the second half defense. I mean, you look at some of the numbers. Vikings are second in the league in first half points allowed. They're averaging just 7.7 all season. I don't think they've given up a first half touchdown since that Atlanta Falcons game. So that first half, they're always making the right plays. They're running the ball. The defense is all over the place. And then second half, it feels like they kind of take their foot off the gas a little bit. And that's kind of ultimately led them to being 22nd in points allowed during the second half, allowing 11.3 points per game in the second half. So I don't necessarily think it's like going to completely derail these last 3 weeks or anything, but it has kind of been a little bit of a trend. Like how you mentioned, down the stretch of that Bears game, they gave up that big play to ultimately lead to that game-winning field goal. Denver didn't exactly go well in the second half either in the game-winning touchdown. But I'm not gonna raise any red flags or anything and say, oh man, defense is gonna cost us the season. Because I mean, the defense has kept them in the season. They played some fantastic football, especially that Raiders game a couple weeks ago. We can't ignore that one where they pitched a shutout and it only took 3 points for the Vikings to actually win that one down the stretch. So, I mean, I don't think this defense is going to be the reason that the Vikings lose games down the stretch necessarily, but second half, we might have to keep an eye on it. And I think that's just part of having a young secondary where rookie Mekhi Blackman, I mean, that last touchdown to T. Higgins, where he's just standing in the end zone watching him reach it across the goal line. Like that can't happen. And I get it. He's a rookie corner. So he's still kind of trying to figure these sort of things out. And overall, like you look at Cameron Bynum, he didn't play exactly well in that second half. I don't know if Harrison Smith has still got it in coverage, if I'm being completely honest. He had a couple really ugly plays throughout the day as well. So yeah, the back end, got to keep an eye on it, but I still think that this defense is really damn good.
When Blackman was just chilling there, like, just hanging out, it reminded me of after I saw the highlight and everything, it reminded me of KJ Osborne ducking like
Yeah.
against the Chargers or something. Like I'm pretty sure he probably didn't do that, but that's certainly what it looked like. So it's like, what are you thinking? And it's really hilarious in a bad way that last year on this very show, we would sit here and go, I wish Ed Donatel would take his fourth quarter defense, whatever he does then, and do
That's
it
true.
the
Yeah.
first 3 quarters. And now I am asking for the opposite. I wish that Flores would do whatever the voodoo is, quarters 1 through 3, just do the same thing in the fourth quarter. If that involves blitzing, do it. because these meltdowns arguably have cost 3 wins, and you're talking about 7-17 versus 10-4. All right, here's what I want you to do next. Right during the bye week, I tweeted, so far so good. I tweeted the Vikings would beat the Raiders. I didn't think it'd be 3-0, but I thought they'd beat the Raiders. I morbidly thought, they're going to lose to the Bengals because they can't win back-to-back games at AFC stadiums. That was correct, much to my chagrin. I did think, and I do think, the Vikings will win the next 2 games and then lose, no matter what the scenario is, on the road at Detroit. I want you, kind sir, to predict the Vikings' record in the final 3 games.
Yeah, I'm right where with you. I think they're going to come back and win this weekend. I think the defense is going to play with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder after what happened on Saturday, and they definitely should. I just think we're going to see a little bit more urgency out of this
Mm-hmm.
team. And I mean, it would have been nice to see it last week because if they had won last week, then we wouldn't be in a situation where they absolutely do kind of need to win this game in order to stay alive, especially in the NFC North race. But I do think they're going to bounce back this weekend and get a win. Detroit obviously blew out Denver last week. They're riding high, but still, that's a tough team, and they might have a little fatigue going into the Sunday. But I mean, Minnesota bounces back this week. I think in ultimate Vikings fashion, I think they're going to come back the next week against the Packers and fall flat on their face again. And then we're looking at an 88 team going into that final week. And by that time, feels like the NFC North will be wrapped up. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if the Vikings do lose, it will be wrapped up. The Lions will be the NFC North champs. So I'm kind of going with the same sort of idea that last time we talked about, where Lions might not be playing too many guys. I don't know if they necessarily have the juice to get into that number 1 seed, especially with a Week 17 game against Dallas on the road. Obviously, Dallas is a very different team at home than on the road, but that one's in Jerry's world. So I kind of expect Dallas to bounce back and win that one. And then Week 18 is kind of just doesn't mean much for the Lions, but it could potentially mean a lot for the Vikings, especially if they are sitting at 8-8 and they do need to get a win to get into the postseason. So I think the Lions are playing some backups. Then Vikings go into Detroit and win that one as well.
All right, so you got 2 Lions wins with a turd, presumably against the Packers. All right, well,
Unfortunately,
yeah,
yeah.
there's no way I could. So the Vikings are only at where they're at with a coin flip chance of the postseason, the controlling their own destiny, because the Packers have lost back-to-back games confoundingly against the Giants and then the Buccaneers. Buccaneers, it's not a like what the hell are you doing? It's just that you should have taken care of business at home, especially if you think you're this big hot team that Jair Alexander says you're going to win out. So you can thank the Packers for kind of face planting in the last couple of weeks for the Vikings to control their own fate. All right, these next 2 topics we're going to talk about ad nauseum in January, February, and March, but we're going to get kickstarted here. I know this will be your favorite question of this episode. In about a minute apiece, give me 3 current draft crushes for the Vikings. You don't have to confine to this criteria, but we're going to need an edge rusher, arguably a running back, and probably a quarterback, because if not now, when? What do you got in general for 3 early draft crushes?
Yeah. So first one right off the bat, I'm not going any of those positions. I'm going defensive tackle Mason Smith out of LSU. I don't necessarily know if that's a guy that the Vikings would be interested in taking in the first round. I mean, Kwesi, with his analytics mind, I don't know if he'd be able to sleep. He'd be able to sleep at night if the Vikings took a defensive tackle in round one. But Mason Smith out of LSU, he is an absolute freak athlete. He's 6'6", almost 320 pounds. This guy's a beast in the middle of the defensive line. And I feel like the Vikings are going to need something at defensive tackle, especially considering Harrison Phillips and Jonathan Bullard are entering free agency in the offseason. And they could use a little bit extra pass rush juice in the middle of that defensive line next to Daniil Hunter. Hopefully they give him an extension in the offseason as well. But yeah, I'd go on Mason Smith. I just think he's got all the tools to be successful at the NFL. He's just an absolutely ridiculous athlete. He's almost like on that same level almost as like a Jordan Davis or a Jalen Carter. Like this guy's an absolute monster. I'd be shocked if he doesn't run under 5 in the 40 at the combine or at his pro day. So that would be the first one.
On him, I guess I should have put defensive tackle in my wish list, but I'm cynical enough to think that they never really invest. It's always Shamar Stephen or Jonathan Bullard, and Bullard is a pretty good football player. But I guess I'm just like they're not going to do it. I've asked for this for half of a decade, and they never go get a sweet ass defensive tackle next to Harrison Phillips, who I forgot is going to be a free agent. That'll be kind of a talker, unforeseen. Who are the other two?
Next one, I do think that the Vikings are going to target a quarterback in this draft, and man, we've talked about this guy before, but holy cow, I hope they go out and get a guy like a Jaden Daniels in this
Mm-hmm.
draft. I mean, that guy has absolutely every single tool that you could want at the quarterback position in the modern day NFL. He can throw pretty much any pass that you want. He's increasingly gotten more accurate over his career with the Tigers as well. And I get it. This is a very heavy LSU draft so far. I'm a little bit biased because I love LSU
Yeah, it's
football,
all good.
but yeah, Jaden Daniels, I think he does everything that you want as a passer, and he adds that explosive mobility with his legs as well. He made plays all season with his legs and just highlight reels filled with all of his runs this season. So it might take a little bit of draft capital for the Vikings to
Mm-hmm.
actually have a chance at getting him, especially now that he's pretty much consensus considered a top 10 prospect at this point. So it depending on where they fall, I don't know how realistic it is, but holy cow, I hope they go.
On the draft capital, I have deduced because it recommended that they pick one last year, CJ Stroud, when we thought he might tumble to 5, 6, or 7. It doesn't matter how much you spend to trade up because if the guy is a sweet ass performer, he's your quarterback future. Nobody cares that you spent blah 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 first rounders to get him. And then if he's a total flop, well, you're screwed for 4 years anyway. And by the time your draft picks return, it's a new day and that's all behind you. And I know that's pretty cut and dry thinking, but I think it's the truth. What is the one knock on Jay Daniels? Why isn't he in the big three with Caleb and Drake May?
I think some of it has to do with just he does get a little bit erratic with his throws at times,
Okay.
especially when he's on the move. So I think that plays a little bit of a part into it. He's not exactly the greatest passer in the world when he's running around in the pocket, and he makes a couple questionable decisions. The interceptions haven't exactly been a bit of an issue, but there are definitely plays in there where he could have been picked off and probably should have been picked off this
Okay.
season. But yeah, I think that'd be the biggest knock on him right now is just some of those throws.
Well, that's okay because we're gonna
Yeah, exactly.
by that time we're gonna have 4, hopefully 5 games with Nick Mullins all together, and we'll be used to somebody making some pretty like what throws. And if Daniels brings that to the table, that's just fine. That's more fun. All right, your third draft crush before we talk about Kirk Cousins a little bit.
All right, I'm gonna stick with the QB spot, but I'm gonna go a little bit further down the line. I sent you a message about this guy earlier in the week, and I think I've kind of decided. Last year, I went with Clayton Tune as my mid-round sleeper. We'll see
Mm-hmm.
if that works out. That Cleveland Browns game didn't exactly look great, but Michael Pratt out of Tulane is he just looks the part of an NFL quarterback. In that offense, he does a great job of progressing through his reads. He's progressively gotten more accurate over his career as well. I think he was right around 65% completion percentage, which is up from where he was like in the 50s during his freshman and sophomore year. So he's definitely gotten better in the accuracy department. And he he has that ability to run as well. It's not like a Jaden Daniels-esque where you have to like really pay attention to him or he's going to break off a 20-yard run or anything, but he's able to move around and he's a big guy too at 6'3", almost 220 pounds. So we're looking at a guy that has the ability to truck through a couple defenders and pick up a few yards with his legs too. So if the Vikings don't go a quarterback in the first round, I think that'd be the guy that I'm looking at. Maybe round, they don't have a third round pick right now, but maybe around 4, maybe 5 if he's available there.
Are we talking ability to move at his 6'3", 220? Are we talking like it looks more like Josh Allen or looks more like Roethlisberger?
I think it looks a little bit more like
Okay,
Roethlisberger
from
at
the
this
younger
point.
days, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he just bowls his way through there.
We'll take it. And right now, even though we got a long way to go in draft speak, where would you find Michael Pratt in a mock draft?
I think he probably goes right around that round 4 spot, middle of
Okay.
the fourth round, somewhere around there.
Okay, cool. And yeah, we'll probably you'll recall vividly how like Sean Clifford, how like
Yeah.
quarterbacks there was a bonanza of just finding almost like jobber quarterbacks in the draft who usually would have gone undrafted. I'm gonna guess that stays and is enhanced based on the Lollapalooza of quarterback injuries this season. All right. So before we get off air, we're going to get your prediction for Vikings Lions, but I want to ask you, you can either take this as your prediction or your recommendation on Kirk Cousins because as predicted, there was a quarterback carousel. The moment he got hurt, we all got sucked into Dobbs mania. It lasted for certainly 2 weeks. The whole experience was about 5 weeks before it petered off. Jaron Hall got what 10 plays on the offense that looked great, and now Nick Mullins is just the quintessential bargain bin gunslinger who just doesn't care about what you think of protecting the ball. It's glorious, it's reckless, it's fun, it's anxiety riddled. So we know all of that now. We know the comments from Kevin O'Connell. The Kirk knows how I feel about him. We certainly want him back. What do you think at 2 years, 60 million, 1 year, 35 million? I don't think they'd spend much more than that. Is this guy going to return to the Vikings roster in addition to getting Jaden Daniels or Michael Pratt?
I would bring him back for the 2024 season. I mean, you look at how that offense was just clipping along in the middle of the season when they had him. Like that 49ers win was some of the best football that I've ever seen Kirk Cousins play. And then early on in that Packers game before he got hurt too. So considering what we've seen, like the success that he and Kevin O'Connell have had together at the NFL level, I do think that I would recommend that the Vikings bring him back for one more year. And especially considering they're going to be on the books for what is it, 28 million, regardless of if they bring him back or not. So, I mean, that right there, if you can get him at a deal that's like 30, 35 million and do it for another year, just run it back one more time. I think I would do it. Give a rookie quarterback or Jaron Hall, whichever direction that they want to go at that backup spot, just another year to sit behind Kirk and learn some more about that offense and just develop a little bit more. I think that the Vikings are in a great position with Kirk Cousins to win now. If he didn't get hurt, I feel like this team would be up there with the Super Bowl contenders. They probably wouldn't have lost that Broncos game. They definitely wouldn't have lost that Bears game. So I think that they'd be looking at a very different position if they had Kirk around, and I would like to see him back in 2024.
It will always be gruesome that right now the Vikings pass protection offensive line, and I think it's Ben Baldwin's metric, they rank number one with PFF,
Yep.
ESPN collaboration. So they were number one in pass protection, number 7 on defense after Cincinnati, and then there's no Kirk for it. And that's all that we've asked for 6 seasons. It's just, I can't believe it. And then it's worth noting that I think the Vikings can get away with bringing Cousins back for one more year of guaranteed money because Jefferson's large money shouldn't kick in until 2025. That's the perk of I mean, he's still going to get a sweet paycheck in 2024 because of the 5th round option. But I think whether you're extending Darisaw, which they will, hopefully Hunter, Hawkinson's already got big money. All of that starts to stack after 2024. So I think they could get away with it. But the other problem with that is that then you're back to your usual conundrum with free agency. Like, well, we don't have much, so we're going to have to get bargain bin guys. We shall see if that translates. And then they would, in this scenario where they draft your Jaden Daniels or Bo Nix, whoever it is, they would have the true blue Alex Smith situation with Patrick Mahomes, where you have
right.
a guy that you trust fully at the enterprise, probably take you to the playoffs at 10-7 or whatever. And then, by the way, Jaden Daniels is chilling and ready for 2025. That has worked. The Packers always do it. So we shall see. All right. Final. So you've already predicted that the Vikings will defeat the Lions. I'm right there with you. I've settled on 30-20. I trust O'Connell in these big games back against the wall. He's shown that they can deliver sans the playoff game last year against the Giants. They did it against the 49ers, like you commented on, which was just a marvelous signature win. What is the score for Vikings over Lions?
I'm right there with you. I think that this defense is going to come out with a chip on their shoulder. Offense, I think, is it's gonna play similarly. Hopefully that they don't have those same turnovers from Nick Mullins. And I think other than that, he played a really damn good football game on Saturday. So I'm going 34-21 Vikings. I just don't trust this.
Sweet.
I don't trust this Detroit defense that much, and I think the Vikings are able to get it done.
Yeah, that would give us a lot of momentum and get charged up for the Packer game. It's a real simple diagnosis for the Vikings. Take care of business at home, and then you have about a 98% chance to get to the postseason. And I said this on a radio show earlier this morning, and it might make some folks roll their eyes, but right now the Vikings are 2-4 at home. And I want you to think, is it more likely that they would finish 4-4 at home or 2-6 or 3-5. I don't know. It just seems like when I'm combing through stats in 8 May or something like that, it will make a lot more sense if they end up being 4-4 at home than 2-6 or 3-5. That's what I'm banking on. All right, sir. By the time that we chat next time, we'll have a playoff picture that's become a little bit more crystallized. Seahawks did the Vikings zero favors with Drew Lock's heroism. Thankfully, the Packers have lost a couple times, and the Rams. I'm convinced that between the Rams and I think the Vikings, one of those teams is at least one of those teams is going to score an upset in the wild card round. Because would you really want to play Stafford and McVay if you were the Lions or even this Philadelphia team that I guess has locker room turmoil? It's
Yeah.
pretty, it's pretty wild. I mean, yeah. Were you going to comment something?
No, it's just, yeah, I think that this playoff is going to be absolutely crazy across the board. These final 3 weeks, got a ton of divisional games that are probably going to determine a lot of these spots over the next few weeks. And honestly, it feels like the playoffs kind of start right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we're getting a few extra bonus weeks of some great football.
And it's already an overused talker because it's so obvious. But if the Bills don't end up catching the Dolphins for the division, just think about how rotten it will be for that team that won whatever division it is, whether that's the Jaguars or the Dolphins or the Chiefs. If you look
The
down,
Chiefs, yeah.
yep, in your wild card games against the Bills, I mean, that would be the ultimate, like, you got to be kidding me. So, all right, sir, we'll talk to you in 1 week, hopefully, about the 8-7 Vikings. All right.
Sounds good, man. See you then. Have a great Christmas.
Yeah, you too. Take it easy.